Hello, I'm Allison Osved. I'm a current APPIC board member and member of the APPIC Postdoctoral work group. I'm here to share with you information about applying for postdoctoral training positions. The process can feel overwhelming, confusing, and fragmented, especially in comparison to the internship application process. APPIC and the APPIC board would like to support and empower you with information, and that's what we're here to talk about today. In this video, we're going to be talking about the background and context for the landscape of postdoctoral training in psychology as it stands right now. You finished nearly all the degree requirements for your degree in psychology. You've started your internship, and you may be wondering how important it is for you to complete a postdoctoral training experience. Especially with many states supporting licensure for psychologists at the completion of the doctoral degree, should I just look for a job? What is the value of postdoctoral training? Because it's not required for your degree, and it may not be required for licensure in the state you wish to practice in, it really is a personal choice. However, that being said, there are certainly a few key factors to consider when making this decision. First, you want to think about what is the purpose of postdoctoral training. There was a recent summit on postdoctoral training, and there's strong consensus at the summit that postdoctoral level training really is about specialized or advanced training. In other words, it should not be for remedial training, for generating hours simply for the purpose of licensure. It's about taking you from generalist psychologist to specialist or advanced practice psychologist and setting you on track and perhaps for board certification in a recognized specialty area. Money is important. One of the common reasons why students might choose to forego a postdoctoral training experience is because they'd like to draw a real salary sooner. So I think there are a couple of real financial considerations and employment considerations to review before you make that decision to jump right into the workforce. So one of the things that's really important is that many people do in fact get hired on directly into a job at the facility where they do their postdoctoral training. And I also think, again, I can't speak to research on this, but I really think that it's typically the case that psychologists who have that advanced and specialized training from a postdoctoral experience are actually going to be more competitive, so they're more likely to have more and better job offers when they do enter the workforce later down the line. And in terms of that immediate concern about student loans, it's often the case that federal student loans can continue to be in deferment while you're on your postdoctoral training year, and in fact, even the interest can be deferred during that experience if you have the right kind of loans. So I think I wouldn't rule out postdoc simply for the financial factors because there can be a lot of financial wins for doing a postdoctoral experience. And when it comes to the issue of hours for licensure, while not all states require postdoc hours or postdoc experience at all, the majority of states and provinces still do have this requirement. And so if you really want to think about being employable and license eligible in the majority of places in the US and Canada, it makes sense to complete a postdoctoral experience. It's in your best interest to do so because you really never know what life will bring. And so right now it may seem like, well, the state where I want to practice doesn't require postdoc hours, so no need to do it. But you just don't know where life will take you. And it's probably in your best interest to think about license eligibility anywhere. So please visit the APPIC webpage for further details on the APPIC and APA Postdoctoral Summit that occurred in May of 2016. At the website, you can review the directed readings that informed the discussions and the decisions that were made at the summit, as well as a summit summary document where you can see all the recommendations that were made at the summit. It is unclear how many postdoctoral training programs and experiences there are in the field of psychology, so the universe is unknown at this point. What I have for you here are some statistics on the postdoctoral experiences and programs. However, these stats are based on information we know, and they are far from representative of the full universe of postdoctoral training experiences. Specifically, these are based on APPIC membership information as well as responses to APPIC surveys. But we all know that not everybody responds to every survey that they are given, so this really is incomplete. The other things that I think is challenging about understanding the postdoctoral training landscape is that programs use different terminology to describe sometimes the same things. So for example, programs might say they offer an emphasis track or a specialty track or an accredited specialty experience. And I think this is an important thing to explore further. So the American Psychological Association, or APA's, Commission on Accreditation, or COA, makes a distinction between clinical training in health service psychology, what was formerly known as professional psychology, and training in specific recognized specialties, such as neuropsychology, behavioral and cognitive psychology, geropsychology, and so on. And we'll discuss this further. Currently, there really is no overarching organizing entity or organization that oversees all of postdoctoral training. And because we don't have this organization, there's no clear agreement on what makes a postdoctoral training experience a program. And that can be very confusing for consumers like yourselves who are trying to understand how many programs there are out there in the world and what they offer exactly. Understandably, there's a great deal of confusion between emphasis and specialty training in psychology. For specialty training specifically, APA's Commission on Accreditation makes that clear distinction between recognized specialty areas and general or broad training in health service psychology, which was formerly referred to as professional psychology. With specialty training, there's a clear path to specialty accreditation on the part of the program at the postdoctoral level, and completing a postdoctoral experience that is specialty accredited would, for you as a trainee, complete the postdoctoral requirement that might be in place for achieving board certification in a specialty area of your choosing. So one of the things that's really required for this kind of certification is that the postdoctoral program offer advanced training, that it be postdoctoral, and that it be in a specialty area with a major area of study in that recognized specialty. So, for example, neuropsychology, geropsychology, behavioral and cognitive psychology, family psychology, and so on. Again, completing a postdoctoral program that's accredited in a specialty area can prepare you, the trainee, to meet those postdoctoral requirements for boarding or ABAP in that specialty practice area later down the line. Emphasis training is a little bit more confusing. This label, I think, can be confusing for both trainees, applicants, and the public. So certainly an emphasis training experience can add value for you, and I think they're important to consider. The new Standards of Accreditation, or SOA, from APA's COA does provide guidance to training programs for designing emphasis training at the postdoctoral level. I think emphasis training can be especially valuable when the emphasis experience is not an area of recognized specialty like we were just discussing. Instead, it might be an emphasis in working with a specific population or a specific problem. So for example, working with LGBT individuals or working with a very specific problem. I think where it gets most confusing for you as a consumer of training programs is when the emphasis training area is in an area that is also a recognized specialty. This is a little bit tricky. So in this occasion, it may be the case that the program is trying to offer a minor experience in a recognized specialty for someone who doesn't want to specialize in that area, and that makes a lot of sense. In other cases, it really may be a major area of study, but they have not gone forward for specialty accreditation. Either way, you want to be an informed consumer and ask questions of the training program about what their thinking is in terms of the emphasis experience they're providing that is actually within a recognized specialty area and why they've made the decisions to do things in that manner. So because emphasis and specialty training can be confusing, I'd recommend you gather further information on the recognized specialties and the educational guidelines related to those specialties. The best way to do that would be to visit the Council of Specialties in Professional Psychology's webpage. Continuing this discussion between specialty versus emphasis training, The APPIC postdoctoral work group surveyed postdoctoral programs, and we do this annually. In 2016, our survey itself specifically addressed this question of emphasis versus specialty training, and particularly specialty accreditation. So what you see in the table here are what training program directors responded to the specific question of, please identify the major area of study in your postdoctoral fellowships and check all that apply. Anything with an asterisk noted by it is an area that is a recognized specialty that could be specialty accredited. And what you see in the two columns is whether or not training programs indicated that they offered an emphasis area in an experience versus had obtained specialty accreditation in a recognized specialty. And you can see there's a big gap between those numbers. So many areas that could be specialty accredited were not, and instead they were offering emphasis training. So these data give us an idea of the distribution of programs in terms of who's offering emphasis versus specialty level training and who's accredited for that specialty training. And I think, again, while this doesn't represent the broad universe of postdoctoral training programs, I think it's probably representative of the proportion of programs that are offering emphasis experiences versus accredited and recognized specialty experiences. The role of research in postdoctoral training in psychology is evolving. Originally in the field of psychology, postdoctoral training was primarily research focused. That was the purpose of obtaining a postdoctoral fellowship. And this really began to change when APA-COA began accrediting postdoctoral programs focused on clinical training for professional psychology, or what's now known as health service psychology. So now there really is a continuum of focus on research and postdoctoral training programs, anywhere from 100% research focused to very little research focus. This has led some to argue that the Boulder model, or the scientist practitioner model of training, is less important in recent years. However, I would argue that that's not exactly the case. The new accreditation guidelines, or the SOAs, from APA-COA clearly state that science, and more importantly, integration of science and practice, are a core profession-wide competency for our field, and that this must be addressed at the postdoctoral level of training for any clinically oriented program that wishes to obtain and maintain accreditation status. So really, research is important, and it's something that sets our profession aside and makes us unique and provides value added. So I think the role of research and how much it's emphasized is going to be individually tailored program to program, but I don't think the importance of research is going away. In fact, I think it remains very important for the future of psychology and the future of healthcare overall. Now, that being said, how important research is to postdoctoral applicants really varies. So on the most recent survey of applicants to postdoctoral programs, so in 2016, we asked, what's important about research for you, or how important is research to you when it comes to determining a postdoctoral training experience? And our survey data suggests that this really varies widely from person to person, with some applicants saying it's extremely important to them, others saying it's not at all important, and some saying it's fairly important. So there's a broad range. What this means is that there's certainly a subset of applicants that are applying to both traditionally research-oriented programs as well as clinically oriented programs. And this can make things challenging, which we'll talk about down the line in terms of managing the divergent expectations and needs between a clinically oriented program and a research-oriented program when it comes to the application cycle. Another important consideration is quality when it comes to postdoctoral training experiences. You might be wondering, how important is it to attend an APA-COA accredited postdoctoral training program or an APPIC member postdoctoral program? And I would say the answer really depends on what you're hoping to get from your postdoctoral training experience. So for example, if you are looking for advanced training in research without any clinical component, then an APA accredited or an APPIC member program really isn't as relevant for you. However, if you're looking for that advanced or specialized clinical training experience in your postdoctoral program, you might want to prioritize accredited programs and/or APPIC member programs. Whatever you decide, it will be important to find ways to assess the quality of training programs that you're considering. So one thing to keep in mind is that accreditation matters. It's a strong marker for the quality of a postdoctoral training program. In other words, this level of regulation is a quality assurance component. That being said, the vast majority of postdoctoral experiences are not currently accredited by APA or CPA or are members of APPIC. So while quality assurance is important and you might look to accreditation as a way to determine the quality of the programs you're considering, it's also true that the vast majority of programs are not accredited, so you may need to use other mechanisms to assess for quality. One thing that I'll say is that there is a great deal of confusion about the difference between organizational membership, such as APPIC, and accreditation, such as APA or CPA. So I'd like to spend just a few moments talking about those differences. That way you'll be more informed about those things as you move forward with your postdoctoral search. So APPIC, for example, is a membership organization. We have certain membership criteria that are required, such as adequate resources to run the program, paying your trainees a stipend, having due process in place to protect trainees so that there is fairness within the program, for example. And these requirements certainly are designed to address quality and training. However, membership is really not the same thing as accreditation. So with a membership organization, the member programs are agreeing to abide by these membership criteria, and they certainly submit documentation illustrating how they plan to do that. But when it comes to accreditation, there really is a higher bar. So with APA and CPA, with their accreditation process, we want to ensure that there's certain minimum standards of quality, and these minimum standards of quality are reviewed through an external review process that includes both self-study submission, site visitors from the accrediting organization, and re-review over certain periods of time. So again, that quality assurance is higher with accreditation compared to a member organization. And as I mentioned, at the postdoc level, the vast majority of programs are not accredited. So in those cases, it will be really important for you as an applicant and consumer to determine if a program does indeed offer quality training, if they treat their trainees fairly, and if they have the adequate resources to provide supervision, clinical experiences, didactic training, or research experiences. As discussed previously, there's no clear time frame for the postdoctoral selection process. This is very different from the internship selection process. So at the internship level, the internship is a degree requirement. And because it's a degree requirement, it's often the case that internship programs will pursue accreditation and APPIC member status. At the postdoctoral level, the experience is not required for receipt of degree, and that makes it a bit murkier in terms of regulation and how much programs invest in pursuing regulations such as accreditation or perhaps APPIC member status. So given the differences between the internship and the postdoc level of training, what we see is that there are also differences with the postdoctoral application and related selection process when contrasted with the internship experience. One stark difference that you'll notice as someone who just started your internship is that there is not a centralized selection mechanism for postdoctoral programs like there was for your internship programs. In other words, there's no computerized match for the postdoc. The one exception to this is for the specialized experience of neuropsychology. So postdoctoral neuropsychology programs, a subset of those programs do participate in a match. Beyond that, all other postdoc programs, there is no match for those programs. And this means that the timeline for postdoctoral applications and selection begins early and lasts longer in comparison to internship. Often the applications for clinical programs are due in December or January, but that can vary. Applications for research programs varies even more widely because these are frequently related to grant funding cycles and when the programs receive the funding and know that they can offer the training position for the next year. Sometimes this is very early, and so they will have deadlines in the fall, almost after you're starting your internship, and sometimes they go much later into the spring because they were just given new funds. So it's important to start preparing for this process much earlier than you did for your internship process. One important step is to find letter writers on your internship who can write you strong letters of recommendation. Similarly, another easy early step you can take is to begin seeking guidance and mentorship from your internship training director. Know that these internship training directors may or may not be familiar with postdoctoral selection processes, so it's also reasonable to seek advice from another mentor who might be better informed. Please visit the Association of Postdoctoral Programs in Clinical Neuropsychology, or APSIN, for information on their neuropsychology postdoc match. Again, this is the one exception where we do have a match at the postdoc level. So as discussed previously, there is no uniform selection practice or time frame for postdoctoral application and selection. Again, there is no match at the postdoctoral level, with the exception of the APSIN match for neuropsychology. The field has tried many strategies for postdoctoral application and selection, including the Uniform Notification Date with Reciprocal Offer, or UNDR, and we did mandate this for all APPIC member programs 1 year. Another strategy we tried were the suggested guidelines, creating a suggested time frame and suggested set of guidelines for making offers, which were not mandated. And a third strategy was the free market system, providing no guidance and allowing the free market to do what it would do. None of those strategies have worked particularly well so far. We have some ideas about why that might be. One theme that was discussed in depth at the recent postdoctoral summit was this idea that cheaters win. And because things are not centralized at the postdoctoral level, we find that people will cheat or try to game the system in some way to best serve their programs. And that might be on the part of the program by making early offers. That might be on the part of the applicant. But we really wonder, is this actually cheating? So when the environment is not set up properly, there are a number of theories that show why two purely rational people might not work in a manner that is best for everybody. And I think that that's what we have here for postdoctoral selection, is that people are not cooperating because they're most concerned about their own situation. And if not everybody is playing fairly, then why should they play fairly too? Another factor that's important to consider is geography. So this may play a role with certain areas of the country being particularly competitive in how postdoctoral selection and offers are handled. So certain areas like the Northeast, for example, can be especially challenging. As discussed previously, there's no clear time frame for the postdoctoral selection process. This is very different from the internship selection process. And so whatever the reason is, we know that it's a stressful environment, and that is part of why we are here today talking about these issues, because we want you as applicants to be as informed as possible about the APPIC selection guidelines so that you don't feel as stressed by the process and you know what we're recommending in terms of fairness for everybody involved. And that's why we're doing this educational campaign. You may be feeling a little overwhelmed with all this background information on postdoctoral training and applications, but don't panic. There's one key difference between applying for a postdoc and applying for internship, and that is that the imbalance is in your favor as the applicant. In other words, there are more positions and programs with positions than there are applicants to fill them. On this slide, you'll see some data on the unfilled programs for last year. There were many open positions lasting well into the spring from a variety of settings and institutions. We must be cautious in interpreting these numbers, as we know that there is a big universe of postdoctoral opportunities out there, and this only represents a small slice of that universe. Nevertheless, these numbers certainly favor applicants, and that's something to be excited about for you. The APPIC board and APPIC postdoctoral work group thank you for taking the time to go through this information with me today. We hope that you found the information helpful and informative, but most importantly, we hope that you feel more confident, excited, and prepared to pursue the postdoctoral application process. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me or my colleagues on the board or the work group.